Got the recorder started there. So I have today two people joining me on the call who will be acting as technical resources today. Jacob Shetler from development and Chris Bowman, one of our technical field implementers. They will be on today and we'll be talking about barcode readers, smart barcode readers, and all sorts of kind of things related to that. And we're going to talk a little bit about a particular project that we did. I know we even have some people on the call. I saw that John Ernst from Anaren had registered. I think John's on the call, and John has a great use case as well for using barcode readers and accessing their ERP system and running their processes as they put chip reels on their chip setting machines and making sure that that's all going along smoothly. So we will go through another scenario today, and hopefully probably not super technical in nature or not in some of those details, but a little bit of it is just to jog your imaginations and have you think about what your company might do. So just wanted to give all of you a little bit of an update on what's going on right now with Hertzler Systems. We continue to work remotely, and so if you catch any hiccups today, it's because I'm at my house and Jacob's at his and Chris is at his. So hopefully everything goes smoothly and we are able to communicate smoothly and have some of those handoffs. Just as we were getting going, Jacob sent me a message that he couldn't get into our VPN at Hertzler and get the slides up. So I was able to hop in and do it quickly. So we will keep on moving along. To contact us, the best way still for any of you that need to contact us is to use email. Use the support, the sales, and accounting addresses, as well as our individual addresses for those of you who know us. And we keep it pretty simple at Hertzler. It's generally just the first name at hertzler.com. So email is the best way to get a hold of us. And so we continue to do a lot of remote work and things like that. To get us started today, I wanted to talk just very briefly about our platform, how we are thinking about GainSeeker, and I know a lot of you, how you use it. We're going to really kind of be focusing here today on the left side of the diagram, the connected machines and devices, user input, in this case, that user input being using barcodes, and connecting with other major enterprise systems. And oftentimes it is ERP. So this larger part of that platform is how we have continued to expand and move beyond our roots. And again, most of you on the phone today on this webinar are very familiar with how you are using it and how you have expanded our use far beyond just kind of basic SPC. So this just gives you a glance of the smart code reader that is being used in this particular application. It is from Zebra, and the key really in this standpoint is the little screen there and the smart device. It's an Android device and is in many ways very similar to most Android cell phones. However, this one has a barcode reader attached to it and integrated in, and you've got a toughened body as well as some of the keypad on there. So this is the particular unit that is being used in this particular application, and Jacob will talk a little bit more about some of the particulars of how we are working with this particular barcode reader. All right, Jacob, you want to hop in and just talk a little bit about why use barcodes? And Chris, you can feel free to hop in too if you have some things you want to add.
Yeah, thanks, Phil. As Phil said, I'm Jacob Shetler, one of the developers at Hertzler. Uh, so why do we use barcodes? Two of the main reasons are around ease of use and faster data entry. So with barcodes, you can have really high information density with a single click or button press. In the project that we're going to talk about a little bit later, they were they had more than one piece of information in different barcodes, and so we were able to parse out those different traceability fields with just a single button press on the barcode scanner. Reducing human error, you can't remove it completely, but it's really hard to type a serial number wrong if you just scan it instead of trying to type it in. Keeping one system as the master system of record is really important for long-term maintenance. So in this project, the company was printing labels from their ERP system that were generated based off of sales orders. Those barcodes then got stuck on the refrigerators. GainSeeker, through the barcode scanner, would read the serial numbers and then request information about those serial numbers from the ERP system. So in this case, the ERP system's the master. GainSeeker doesn't really have to know about how the barcodes are generated or what exactly they mean. And so that makes for easier long-term maintenance. Another great reason to use barcodes is tracking supplier information. So while you can do this without barcodes, barcodes make it a lot easier to track purchases or lot numbers, that sort of information from suppliers. That way you can track down where defects are occurring.
Oh, yeah, I guess it's up to me to advance the slides, isn't it, today, Jacob?
It is. So in late fall, early winter 2019, 2020, Chris and I worked with a major supplier of RV appliances in the Elkhart, Indiana area. They were transitioning from their legacy AS400 system to Microsoft Dynamics 365 on the cloud. And they needed a way to be able to link information from their quality processes to their new ERP. And they decided to go with GainSeeker to perform this linking. So Chris and I worked on the refrigeration manufacturing process at this supplier. So the first, or one of the areas that we worked on was where the supplier was running cooling tests on the refrigerators. So as fridges on conveyor belts came into this test area, test cell, they would get slotted into a test cell, and then operators needed to quickly scan both the serial number and model number from the fridge, and then what cell the fridge was being tested in. So while they were running this test, they had a PLC communicating with the thermocouple inside of the fridge. And that PLC was writing out to a data historian, which is basically just a database for those of you that don't know. And so on the barcode scanner, when they would scan the model and serial number from the fridge and then the test cell, we had to link that information about the test that was being run and also where the fridge was located, not only between GainSeeker and D365, but also between those two systems and the data historian. So there were three systems that we were linking together with GainSeeker. So the solution that we came up with for this situation was we designed a web page specifically for the form factor of the barcode scanners, where the operator would scan the barcode on the fridge, which had both the serial number and the model number, which we would parse out. And then they would scan the test cell, and then that would submit data to GainSeeker. Then there was a Python script that would link the data that was just submitted to GainSeeker with the test information that was coming from the PLC, and then would also eventually submit that information to their ERP system. In another area, the supplier was doing a visual and functional defect audit of the refrigerators. So operators were entering defects by hand into a system of record. The sheet of defects that they had at every station for all the possible defects that could happen on a fridge was extremely complicated. It was about 2 pieces of paper tall. You would take a location and a component and then the actual defect of the fridge. And that would give the operator this magic number that was unique for each one of those 3 combos. And that's what they would enter into the system. So with around 20 options for each of the location and components and defects, you can imagine how complicated that sheet would be. So operators were spending a lot of time looking at the matrix or sometimes memorizing the most frequent ones that they were entering. And so speed of entry was pretty low during this process. The solution that we came up for the test cell, or for the defect audit, excuse me, using the smart barcode scanners, was another series of web pages that were accessed from the scanner. So if you go to the next screen, Phil. Yeah, okay, so this is the previous defect sheet. You can kind of tell like how many different numbers there are. This is probably about, I don't know, a quarter.
It's about a third of the whole sheet. It's about a legal sized page full.
Yep.
Very small print. That this is blown up.
Right. Yeah, this is much bigger than it was. And then if you go to the next one, this is what the UI looked like, the operator interface looked like on the barcode scanner. So on the first screen over on the left, after operators would log in and enter basic traceability information, like their name and shift and line, then they would scan the serial number and model number from the fridge, and then either pass the entire unit or start entering defects for that unit. If they decided to enter defects, they'd get over to the right side screen where they would scan the location, the component, and then the actual defect. So instead of having this really complicated matrix with these numbers that no one really knows how they were generated, they could have 3 much easier to read sheets that all had barcodes on them hanging up at their stations. And they would scan the one, scan the component, scan the defect, click submit. And this was designed for maximum throughput so they could scan the defects really quickly.
So Jacob, back to their paper sheet. How was this data ever getting recorded for historical purposes? Do you know?
No, I'm not sure.
I don't know if Chris, you're muted. Chris, do you know on this one how those sheets were actually being used?
No, I don't have the detail on how the information got from where they entered this information into the ERP system.
Okay. I think it's safe to say that it probably was a manual system. Maybe they had a scanner, maybe because of these numbers, they actually had a scanner. And if they were marked, I really would kind of doubt it was that. So we also know the challenge there is you have time lag. And again, was it in the right place? And this again is a section of a legal sheet size piece of paper, and went from that to this is a much more concise data entry unit.
Yep, exactly.
Okay. Anything else you want to say, Jacob, about kind of how you do a web page like this and pass that information into GainSeeker? Anything that our listeners might be helpful to them to know?
Yeah, so the web pages that we built were backed by an API that the pages would submit information to this API, and then the API would store the data directly into the GainSeeker database. So that was my job during the project, which took a little less than a week to do. And then Chris was in charge of designing the Python scripts to read that information that was being stored in the database and do the linking together of the different systems.
Okay. Fantastic. Chris, you want to talk just a little bit about linking these systems together and some of the work that you did for this client so far?
Sure. Kind of what I'm going to be focusing on here to begin with is what needs to be done, particularly on the customer side, to help make a successful project. One of the things that needs to be done is we need to figure out how is GainSeeker going to get access to the system of records. For example, in this particular case, we had the PLCs actually were transmitting the data automatically to a database historian, and GainSeeker was pulling data from the historian and then storing it in GainSeeker. And it was also then taking that data and calculating, is this item ready to be released or not, and then passing that information on to the ERP system so that they could either take the item offline or continue on so they could package it so it could be shipped. Well, one of the things that needs to be done here is we need to get that data being transmitted to the database historian, and we had to figure out how GainSeeker is going to get access to that. If we're still doing those things during the time of the project, it can then delay things or expand the amount of time the project needs. Another item that when you have to focus on this is how are we going to tie all these things together? In this particular case, every one of these units had a serial number. So the serial number was part of the barcodes, and we were using that when we collected data so we could tie all the quality data to a particular element, and then we could then use that information to calculate whether or not the product was ready to be released and pass that on to the ERP system. So there are other things that were also common keys, most of which we were actually collecting through barcode readers, like, for example, the station that the test was being done at. All that information was being pulled together. Knowing how we can cross-link the information is something that will be critical to having a successful implementation. Timing of data queries. This can be a touchy issue, and it's really hard to figure it all out in advance. Some of the things where this can come into play is, for example, where is the master data residing? For an example of what I mean by this as the master of data is, okay, if data gets into the system incorrectly, where does it get corrected? Where do we fix it? I mean, which system is going to be saying the master data, and that's where we change it? And if it does get changed, that changes needs to get replicated into the other systems. So that's one of the things that you need to be worried about is, okay, when can we actually pull the data from one system into another? And what happens after if it gets changed? How does those changes get replicated? Another aspect of timing that can be very, very critical is basically workflow issues. For example, if things are going through a final quality check and then they're just kind of moving on down a conveyor belt and getting ready to be taken to packaging, or if they need to be pulled off to have some rework done, well, how big is that gap? If, for example, it's going to be a day or two between when the test is done and when the item is like either pulled off and sent into packing or pulled off the queue and quarantined to do rework, then it's not really a big deal. But if this is just going down a conveyor belt and within 5 minutes, they need to know whether or not this item is good and can be sent on to shipping or not, that's going to be a major issue that you need to figure out on the timing. With any system that you're putting together like this, especially any complicated system, you need to think about error trapping, okay? What if someone scans the wrong barcode? It's pretty darn rare for scanning a barcode not to get the correct value. It's not impossible because barcodes can get smeared or are damaged or other things, but it's not common at all. However, what happens if someone, for example, scans the wrong data, the barcode? They're trying to scan the serial number, but they actually scan a lot code. So one of the things that we often do when we're doing this type of system is put in some type of validation or error checking. This can be very simple. For example, if the serial numbers are all 12 characters, but the lot numbers are all 8 characters, when we're trying to scan the serial number, we can check the length of the data string that we get back, and if it's not the right length, we can pop up an error message and tell them something's wrong. Other times we might need to be validating the input versus some type of list of possible values. It can be a formatting issue. For example, it's like 8 digits followed by a hyphen followed by 3 digits, and it's all numeric. We can check things like that to make sure that it is valid. So, whenever you're building a system like this, you always need to pay attention to error trapping. As far as how we're doing in Python, well, Python is a very, very flexible language, and there's a lot of information on there how to do various things out there on the web. It's a little bit general to be just saying, hey, what are some Python tips? All I can say in general at this high level discussion we're having is try and modulize things so you can reuse code whenever possible. Make sure you document in your code, use functions as part of modulating, creating things in modules so you can replicate and use code in different places. And as always, test, test, test. Back to you, Phil.
All right. Thank you so much, Chris. That's fantastic advice. And again, giving people that framework and ideas about how to have a successful implementation and a successful project, and just some of the things that are not necessarily always obvious. It's good to get those out on the table and have us think about those. All right, we have come to the time. We've got a few minutes left here. Have some time for some questions. So if you do have any, go ahead, and if you can get into the chat window and enter those in, and I will check those out and pose them to our panelists. While I'm waiting here, Jacob, you have anything else you'd like to add after some of Chris's comments there?
Yeah, Phil, could you go back to the slide when Chris was sharing?
Should be up now.
Yeah, I would just echo what Chris said about having a clear understanding of what data elements are going to bind the different systems together is really important, and having a good setup, really architecting that part of the system makes a big difference in the implementation.
Okay. Well, I'm not getting any questions, so I am going to go on and give you all a little sneak peek here. So we have coming up a maintenance release of GainSeeker. And one of the things we talked some about Python, and Chris talked about documenting your code, et cetera. One of the nice little features we have coming up is we're going to have improved script archiving and versioning. So you'll be able to keep better track of the changes that you've made in your scripts. And this is one of those kinds of updates and features that happens when some of your developers get out in the field and they're doing a lot of work, and they come back and they're like, hey, we could improve this. I won't mention any names or anything. And also some increased enhancements to email alerts for audit trail entries and changes. We have updated the color palettes, make that more system-wide. And then again, something requested by some customers is in defect charts, the ability to remove $signs and add a different label. We know that some of you are expressing some of that data in other ways. So we had a couple customers ask for that. So this is a maintenance release. It's an interim release. We will not be sending out a mass email to let you know on that, but we'll be updating things on the website and updating the downloads and such. So if that's something that you would like to have, please let us know, and you can go to the website as usual and request the update. It's not released yet. It will be out here within the next week or two, but just wanted to give you a little bit of a heads up on that. And finally, we have our next Tech Tips Live, third Thursday again, coming up here later in May, and we will dig a little more deeply into integrating ERP and GainSeeker. So we'll kind of dispose with the barcode side of it, and to get ERP systems and GainSeeker to talk and work together, talk about some of the basics of how that's done, some of the differences today with premise-based and cloud systems, and how some of that is working. So that will be our Tech Tips Live in a month, and I hope you all can join that. We'll have this recording posted probably later this week or first part of next week on the website as usual. Thank you all so much for joining us. It's great to have you here, and hope to see you all next month. Thanks a lot, all.